Okay, so the next poem that we did was Greater Love by Wilfred Owen. And this poem, I interpreted it as he was going through a hard time when he wrote this. He just lost his best friend in a battle and he was shell shocked. And also, he was trying to get into a relationship with another poet. So I interpreted it as he wasn't ready for another relationship because of the greater love that he shared between his friend and the other soldiers on the battlefield. And throughout this whole poem, he addresses love, humanity, and himself. And he kind of juxtaposes your typical stereotypical ideals of love and what it was like on the battlefield. So he said, like, red lips are not so red. So when you think of red lips, like, that's a symbol of love. And he said, it's not as red as the stained stones kissed by the English dead. So he's saying it's not as red as the tombstones and all the people that died in battle.
So yeah, kind of like a comparison with the as simile type deal. With red lips are not so red. And then straight into the stained stones are kissed by the English dead. It's kind of comparing the two, and it's kind of more like it's got like a negative feel to it. In the beginning, he's kind of more like it's not like his attitude towards it is kind of like
he's more
bitter,
like
bitter and
like resentful about how this love isn't as what you would typically think of. And also he makes this contrast more apparent because he does visual prosody. He'll indent every single time where he juxtaposes what you normally would think of love. And he also said, kindness of wooed and wooer seems shame to their love pure. So this kind of goes into the relationship thing. So the kindness that would be shared between him and his partner would almost shame the love that he felt for his soldiers.
Right. And when I first read the wooed and the wooer part, I kind of saw it as who is being wooed and who is the wooer. And I mean, okay. It's kind of like he's very bitter, but that's kind of when you're like, ooh, you're wooing them is kind of like more of like a positive tone. Yeah. But that's not what he was aiming for. I mean, it's kind of just like a playful type.
Yeah.
He just throws in the kindness as wooed and wooer.
Yeah, and then he's like, it seems shame. Mm-hmm. So you would see that. And then he directly addresses love the first time in this part. He says, oh, love, your eyes lose lure when I behold eyes blinded in my steed. So he's saying, like, love loses its appeal when he sees, like, the people that he killed during the war. And I kind of saw, like, the language in here, like, when he says, oh, love, and wooed and wooer. Like, it seems more formal.
Formal and more, like, back in old time, like, thy and, like, other types of... Like a old English.
Yeah, which I kind of found interesting because it kind of detached himself from it. Like, instead of making it really personal, it kind of goes back to, like, he didn't feel connected at the time because of what he went through in World War I, because that's what the thing was based in. He then mentions, like, he again says, like, love, and then he'll put knife skewed, limbs knife skewed, which makes you think of, like, death, and it juxtaposes it.
He goes straight from talking about love and attitude with towards love and goes straight into knife skewed.
Yeah. And then he also says, in a place where God seems not to care. And this also seems super bitter, and he's resentful that God's not with the soldiers on the battlefield. Because at the time, like World War I, people think like God wasn't in there because, no one had seen war at the magnitude before. And he mentions like death's extreme decrepitude. And so he personifies love, but in this part, he also personifies death. So it kind of balances it out also and adds to like the contrasting of what you would think love is. And he also says, love's voice sings not so soft, though even as wind murmuring through raftered loft. And when I thought of loft, I thought like, it's in a place like, it's kind of like abandoned.
Abandoned up and raftered. Rafters are kind of more, they're not steady. There's holes stable, in them. There's like, it's more, it's sketchy as you might want to put it. It's like not like homey or anything.
Yeah, it's not with the rest of the home. It's right, separate from it. It's
separate and it's cold and it's like quiet.
And he compares that to love. So love would be somewhere like, when you think of that, it's like a negative connotation to it. He also says, your dear voice is not as dear as theirs whom none now hear. So that's again saying like, the people like, stereotypical love between the living isn't the same as the love shared between the soldiers that have lived together and died together on the battlefield. And it says, now earth has stopped their piteous mouths that coughed. So that's again saying, that's personifying earth and saying like how they died on the battlefield. However, there is a fulcrum in the last stanza because in the three stanzas he's addressing humanity and love, and on the last one he's addressing himself because he directly says heart. So he's addressing his consciousness and what he really feels about it.
Right. He's Yeah, the whole time he's kind of more like from like I said before, is really bitter. It starts to kind of like play around or like wooed and wooer and starts to talk about love and slender attitude, and then go straight into words like death and knife skewed and lure and decrepitude and just all types of like it, making it really sound really bitter instead of really positive. But at the end,
He begins to realize like his true emotion is just like sadness, and that he's sad that he can't be with his friends and his ex-soldiers, because he says like he's like, heart you were never hot, nor large nor full, like hearts made great with shot. Like his heart wasn't as big as those that were killed tragically in the war. And he said, and though your hand be pale, paler are all which trail you cross through flame and hail. So he's saying like I kind of thought of it like the flame and hail were like the tribulations that he had during his time in World War One, and he had to like face all of these different dangers and all of these different events in his life. And then the last line, which is again like visual prosody, is there's an indent, so it makes you notice it, and it says, "Weep, you may weep, for you may touch them not." So instead of being like bitter throughout the rest of it, he's more sad that he can't see them again. So, and which really, yeah, that hits on the tone of the poem, like the overall.
And at the very end, the repeating with the repetition of "weep," it really shows that. I mean, he was really sad about it, but he realizes that. I mean, being sad about it is something that it's better than being bitter because you understand a little more.
Yeah. And I was thinking maybe like since in this battle where he lost his friend, he became shell shocked, so he wasn't responding, and maybe the 3 stanzas in front of this one was what he was feeling like when he was going through shell shock, and in the last stanza he's finally breaking through and realizing what he really feels by talking to himself instead of other people.
And throughout the whole poem, starting with like the first line, and then as you keep going, he said, "Red lips are not so red." Where's the next one? Your voice sings not so soft. Your heart, you were never hot. Your dear voice is not so dear. It's kind of like I saw it kind of as an oxymoron where like, you know, it contradicts itself where it says red lips, you're not so red, like well, if the red
love
lips
isn't as strong now.
if they're red lips, well, why aren't they so red? And if it's your voice sings but not so soft, then how does it sing? And your dear voice is not so dear, then if you call it a dear voice, then why is it not so
maybe
dear?
like after his experience in World War One, he didn't see everything as vivid as other people saw. Like red lips weren't so red anymore because of what he went through, and life lost its appeal in that part. So